Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Eric Brown. He is the VP of Corporate Marketing at DataStax. Eric, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on, Logan.
Oh, thank you for joining me, Eric. We're going to be talking about the results of a survey that you guys recently commissioned, loosely titled the Me Culture, and what some of the implications are of the findings that you guys that rose to the surface there in what you guys were looking at, especially for B2B marketers in our audience here. But before we jump straight into that, Eric, I would love for you to share with listeners a little bit about your background, what you and the team at DataStax are up to, for a little bit of context on today's conversation.
Sure, happy to. First of all, I'm Eric Brown. I've been in tech marketing for 2.5 decades, all in Silicon Valley, spanning everything from media companies to hardware, software, chips, consumer, B2B, everything in between. And I've been at DataStax for 2.5 years now. DataStax is the leading provider of the Active Everywhere hybrid cloud database built on Apache Cassandra. And we power amazing enterprise applications for some of the world's biggest brands: Macy's, Walmart, Cisco, Comcast, Delta, ING Bank, Capital One, Condé Nast, and you name a famous company, a big company in the world, and DataStax probably powers a significant portion of their modern applications.
I love it. You guys are working behind the scenes to make sure that we are able to interact with some of our favorite brands, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And what people forget as marketers is that as glitzy and as glamorous and as flashy as your outward facing experience might be, you might have the best UX, you might have the best functionality in your app or in your website or even in your store. But if you're not doing the right things, the smart things behind the scenes, then a lot of that can be wasted time and wasted effort.
Yeah, it can be all for naught if it's not built on a strong foundation. So I love the work that you guys are doing, obviously getting to work with some big brands and doing some great stuff. So Eric, let's talk a little bit about the context for this survey that you guys commissioned, what you were looking for, kind of how you went about it, and who was surveyed, that sort of stuff. Let's lay a little bit of the groundwork and then we'll get into some of the findings.
Sure, absolutely. One of the key things that our enterprise customers turn to us for is how do we create better customer experiences for our customers? And by that, I mean, how would Macy's create a better customer experience for Macy's customers? How would ING Bank create a better customer experience for their banking customers? How would Delta create a better customer experience for airline customers? When we are creating that CX experience, we really want to know what is required of the data infrastructure on the technical side, but also on the consumer side, what types of personalization and customization and special treatment do they really want?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you guys commissioned a Harris Poll survey looking into these aspects. Who did you talk to? Who were the subjects? What were the demographics? Give us a little bit of context there.
Great. Certainly. We spoke to over 1,500 adults across 4 countries, United States, United Kingdom, France, and Germany, to explore what they expect to require from the brands they do business with today. We had a lot of open-ended questions about how long will you wait for various services, such as food delivery, a movie to download, customer service at a retail store. How much money would you be willing to spend for faster or better service? How important is personalization in a variety of scenarios? And perhaps controversially, would you be willing to share more personal data to get a better experience for yourself? And then finally, just for fun, who do you trust better for recommendations? Your app or your website, or your significant other in life? And there were some really interesting things we found about that as well.
Awesome. We're going to have to dive into that aspect here in a little bit. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the three core concepts that you were looking at in this survey and measuring across, these different open and closed-ended questions. Tell us about those three core elements that you were looking for or rose to the top in the consumer sentiment you were looking at here, Eric.
The three main things that consumers today are looking for, and this was true across all 4 countries where we surveyed, is personalization. Some people call that customization, but personalization goes well beyond customization. Digitization, or the digital recommendations, and finally, real-time interactions. And I should say, when it comes to that notion of personalization, it is really bespoke for one person as opposed to just the right size for hundreds or thousands, which is the way marketers have traditionally looked at customization.
That's interesting. Tell me about that difference that you see there, Eric.
Sure. I'll use myself as an example. If a traditional marketer was lumping me in with other 48-year-old tech worker males in Silicon Valley, and trying to recommend a movie for me, or a car for me, or clothing for me, what they would come up with might actually hit the mark. We think about the tech culture and the tech stereotype. If you were going to serve me fashion recommendations, you might give me a hoodie and jeans that are comfortable but not so fashionable. If you're thinking about movies, you might recommend only the latest and greatest from Marvel or Star Wars.
I knew you were going there.
Yes, and if you were recommending a car, it would probably be a Tesla or a Prius, depending on how much money I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
But
okay.
none of those would fit. None of those would fit me uniquely. None of those, with the exception of the Marvel movies, would be my personal unique interest.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think that is a great example. So that makes that difference on personalization, really clear. As you looked at those three in the results of this survey that you guys commissioned, Eric, the real-time interaction, so the speed of the customer experience, the amount of personalization and customization, and then the power of recommendations, was there one that seemed to be stronger than the others, or are they equal legs to a 3-legged stool?
They're equal legs, I think, with one being easier to do. Digital recommendation, everybody gets recommendations all the time. Netflix has done this forever. You download one movie, it recommends 5 others that will be similar. Amazon does a great job of recommendation. Basically, every website, every app we go to today for a product or a service has gotten pretty good at recommendation. The challenge becomes, again, is it really bespoke and personal to me uniquely and individually? And what we're also finding more important, is it in real time? For example, if I am on my notebook in the middle of the day and I am looking for trips on an airline site, I am going to want trips that fit the price criteria and the flying criteria, day of time, all of that for my business needs. If I'm looking at 7 o'clock at night and I'm looking on my cell phone, I want something that is probably going to be for a vacation or a personal trip. So it's not only real time, but it's also time of day and knowing different modes and patterns of behavior so that you can really anticipate with that data layer what your customer wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of that next level beyond, the simple personalization tokens that we all think of as marketers, and really that contextual personalization is what you're alluding to there. And, where am I looking at flights? What time of day? What device am I using? Those sorts of things. So what did you guys find in the results of these stories when it comes to faster service?
Sure. Well, number one, the top line message is that people are incredibly impatient, and wait times are going down. If somebody sends a message on Twitter, they're looking for a response within an hour. If somebody makes a phone call, which almost nobody does anymore for service or support, they expect a resolution, not just an answer, and not just to be put on hold and go through those annoying phone trees, but they expect a resolution within an hour. For deliveries, people expect to know where their package is. Nobody wants to wait for that 2 to 4 hour window anymore, whether you're Comcast or FedEx or UPS. So across the board, wait times are going down. And what we find is that all demographics, all countries share a real impatience. And again, it's not just for a response, but it's for a resolution, which is a very big difference.
Yeah. And that makes sense for me. I mean, there's additional benefits I get out of my Amazon Prime membership, but that $89 a year or whatever it is right now, I don't even balk at that just for the fact that I know I can get free 2-day shipping for pretty much anything I'm going to order from Amazon. So did you find that is that just anecdotal feedback, or was that kind of across the board that people were willing to spend money for that faster, more convenient service?
Actually, what we found is that, and it was kind of intuitive, and anybody can tell you, yes, everybody's impatient these days. What we found, in addition to that impatience, is that desire for personalization, customization, and to the unit of one, to an individual human. We did find that even millennials are willing to spend extra money for that personalized experience. And again, across the board, all demographics, male, female, all age groups are willing to spend more money for personalization, which is a great opportunity for marketers to expand their top line and not just think about data infrastructure as a bottom line cost savings type of thing, but a real revenue enhancer and builder. But millennials were willing to spend 40% on top of the regular price for a personalized experience. And think about what that means. I'm thinking about the Avengers pre-sale meltdown that happened just a couple of days ago, and all the revenue that was lost in terms of websites being down for a variety of reasons, but also the revenue that was lost because there are people who might have been willing to pay more money to jump the queue, more money for a better seat, more money for an early showing, more money for the first showing, and millennials in particular, up to 40% more. That is lost revenue that companies could be making up to invest in better experiences across the board and to win more customer loyalty, which really is the long-term play.
Yeah, absolutely. With a lot of the marketers that listen to our show being in the tech space, being in the SaaS space, where that customer loyalty is as much a contributor to the health of their organization as new inbound leads, I think you touch on something that's really important. So we talked about folks being impatient, having expectations for lower resolution times or quicker resolution times. You touched on earlier the power of digital recommendations and comparing that people's trust or desire for that versus the input of their significant other. I had to come back to that. Tell us a little bit about your findings on that point, Eric.
Sure. Yeah. In fact, that we found very interesting. In the US and the UK, more adults are choosing digital recommendations versus their significant other. In the US, it's 64% who prefer digital. In the UK, it's 61% who prefer digital. And I had some friends here in Silicon Valley where we use tech for everything, joking about, well, of course, I'm going to go to my app and not my girlfriend or boyfriend or wife or the person I'm dating. But I think that is a really big shift in who knows us better. Less in Germany. In Germany, it was about 50-50, where 52% of German adults choose digital. But in France, they're bucking the trend. I guess Vive la France, they still believe in the power of their significant others. 55% of French adults trust their SO versus their app.
Interesting.
Or any other digital experience.
Interesting. I love that question was in there. I think the results are definitely interesting. So I love hearing that. But let's transition now, Eric, to really, what marketers can do about it. As you mentioned, there is money on the table when it comes to taking advantage of and really delivering on these elements of quicker interactions, faster time to resolution, better contextual personalization, and digital recommendations. One of the things I know you and I were chatting about offline before we hit record is that marketers really need to be thinking operationally about the infrastructure to deliver on these things. If they understand what you're talking about, what the survey like yours and others point to, that this is important, they need to take the next steps on figuring out how to deliver these, right?
Absolutely. I think a lot of marketers focused on the front end, the UX, what the customer actually sees, what the customer experiences, and how the customer interacts with an app or a website or even in store. And we do find some amazing companies, Macy's in particular, doing awesome things that combine in-store and online experiences for just the outstanding customer experience. But you can't stop at that customer touch point and what the customer actually experiences. If you have not architected your data infrastructure in the right way to be contextual, always on, real time, distributed, and scalable, anything that you do on the front end is ultimately going to fall short. That's number one. So data infrastructure matters. Number two is the data inputs also matter. There are certain things that customers are willing to spend more money for. There are certain places, services, products where customers are willing to give you more of their personal data if they know they're going to get a better product or experience or service as a result. But companies today are capturing way too much data and not using it in an intelligent way, or capturing things that really don't matter. For example, I get completely annoyed when I get a random email from my auto insurance company saying happy birthday. That means absolutely nothing to me.
Right.
It's one more email in my day that I need to worry about. I'd rather that auto insurance company come up with something that would be unique and compelling for me, and that might not be tied to my birthday, but maybe it would say, and the technology does exist to do all of this. We just saw that you had a 500-mile drive from the Bay Area to Los Angeles, and the car data showed, if I chose to activate this, that you were at Disney. Here's $25 off for some food and beverage in Disneyland. Now that would be a bespoke, customized, awesome experience that is much better than one more email from my insurance company saying happy birthday.
Right. That what they, are actually doing with that quote unquote personalization is actually taking your time to delete the email as opposed to adding value. So not only is, not all data created equal, as you alluded to there, but the use of it can actually hurt you or help you. But we need to be methodical in how we think about using it in the actual application, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the bottom line is data infrastructure matters, and data inputs matter as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, this has been a great conversation. I love the way that you guys surfaced some of these sentiments among buyers and really unpacked it into some tactical ways that B2B marketers can apply the learnings from the survey that you guys commissioned. If anybody listening to this would like to stay connected with you, reach out and ask any follow-up questions of you directly, or find access to some of the data or the report that you guys put together, what would be the best way for them to go about doing those?
Sure. Anybody can reach me on LinkedIn. I am Eric Channing Brown on LinkedIn. And Eric Brown is a very common name. It doesn't search very well. If you do a search for Eric Channing Brown with DataStax, it does. I'm very happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. My Twitter is at Eric Channing. That's EricChanning. And you can always contact me through DataStax. It's eric.brown@datastax.com. And if you want to know more about how to create a better data infrastructure or to learn about the modern data cloud, please check out datastax.com. That's DATASTAX.com.
Awesome. And you are also the host of a podcast as well. I'd be remiss without mentioning that. Can you let folks know the name of your show and where they could find out more or subscribe to that show if they like?
Oh, that's very kind, Logan, and thank you so much. Yes, we have a little play on the name DataStax, which is the company name, and we call our podcast series Data Snacks, DATASNAX. And our goal is to provide snackable content for anybody on the run who needs to know more about what's happening in the world of data clouds, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and everything in the way of data infrastructure.
I love it. I love it. We all need snackable content as we're on the run because we're constantly all on the run these days. So on that note, thank you for sharing some great value that hopefully our listeners are getting on the run, on the road somewhere today. Eric, this has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Logan. Love your show. Love you as a host and so grateful to be included. So thank you.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Eric. We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.